Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Rock and Roll 2025. Remember, 2024 was our debut season. We had a fantastic season last year, and we're looking forward to an amazing school season this time as well. We've got more teams, so lots more things to talk about on Rock and Roll when we get going. So thanks for joining us. Stay tuned.
Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
Hearts racing fast, we feel alive. For miles and miles, let your spirit fly. There's no turning back, the road is yours.
German-engineered tyres for Sri Lankan roads. Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
As you know, Rock and Roll is brought to you by Seat. And in this In Control segment, just like a Seat tire, we're going to be looking at someone who was in control. Lots of controversy about the disallowed Shan Altaf try in the final of the school's knockout trophy. But let's talk about Gihan Yatawara, whether he was in control or not. This is the segment of In Control brought to you by Seat. We're talking about Seat tires, we talk always about control. Now, we always have to have control in whatever we are doing, especially if you're a rugby player, you've got to have control over what you're doing on the field. And if you are a rugby player, you also have to have control over what you're doing off the field. But a gentleman in the field that we don't always talk about, I thought we could talk about in the In Control segment today, Abdullah, and that was referee Gihan Yatawara, or the referee, whoever the referee is. He's the man who really has to control the whole proceedings in any rugby match. And we had a bit of controversy in the final between Trinity and Isipathana, and we'd like to examine that, give you a little bit of analysis and say whether Gihan Yatawara was in control or wasn't he in control. We think he was, but we'll show you why. So here's the first clip, Abdullah. We see Isipathana trying to clear, and it's charged down by Trinity. The ball goes back, Trinity hacks it through, and Avishka Hiran going back knocks the ball on. And you can see referee Atawara very clearly saying that's a knock-on. Now Trinity have the advantage from the knock-on, and a knock-on penalty is just a scrum, knock-on advantage is just a scrum advantage, right? So it's not as long as a penalty advantage might be as well. And you watch Trinity, they pick and go. They're about 3 or 4 phases from about 18 meters back, they get to within almost 1 meter, and that's just where the ball is dropped. And there you can see the line there, a few inches short of the line. So we might even argue that advantage has been played and that advantage is over. But here we see referee Atawara gets a call from his assistant referee, and he looks around, he asks his assistant referee where's the spot, and he goes back for Avishka Hiran's original knock-on and gives the scrum to Trinity. So that's the advantage law, right? You've got to get territorial or tactical advantage, and that's when advantage is over. Now there may be a debate. What do you think? Was advantage over there, or was it not for the knock-on?
Yeah, well, definitely looked as if advantage was over because the Trinity had gained considerable amount of ground, and also there were quite a few phases that were created subsequently. But in the case, as in the case in most situations, it's very subjective, isn't it? It comes down to interpretation at the end of the day. And I think on that occasion, also there was a bit of messaging that came from these assistant referees as well, which also added to probably the confusion that everyone at the ground and us on witnessing the game also experienced. But yes, it's one of those situations where it's very hard. It comes down to referee's interpretation at the end of the day.
Sure, and that one he assumed that advantage was not over, came back for the scrum, no problems at all. Of course, Trinity twice they knocked on with the line staring them in the face.
Also, just another point. Also, another thing which we need to keep in mind is the referee has to say advantage over.
Yeah.
So, did he say advantage over? Is the question. I don't think so. So he let the phases go, and then after that he brought back play. So as far as he was concerned, and as we have to believe, advantage was not over because he didn't say so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people may have raised this point when the referee says advantage. Usually they have their hand out, but it's quite difficult to run and keep up with players with one hand going vertically out from and also you end up slapping some of the players in the face as well. So you have to keep your hand out for as long as necessary, but you can't just keep your hand out for the whole of the phases to signal advantage. You can signal a new advantage, but sometimes until, as Abdullah said, you say advantage over, the advantage still keeps applying. So let's look now at that disallowed try and the advantage and how the law was applied in that particular instance as well. So we see here, Shrayan Satish Kumar never went behind the last foot, unfortunately. Brilliant game he had, but that time he just went in from the side, and referee Atavara had his arm up very clearly. Now he can't be running with his arm up across the field as well, and there's one phase that breaks down here. Trinity get all over the ball there, slow it down, and just in the next movement, Shan Altaf intercepts the ball and he has off down the field and scores what everyone in the ground thought was a try. Now, I don't know if you were watching the game live, Abdullah, or we were watching it on commentary, but when I was commentating this game, I said, oh, surely they've got to call him back, because I remembered the advantage. And they didn't call him back, which is when I was like, oh, okay, it's a try. But then Ravin Alexander, who was running the line, the assistant referee, comes in and tells Gihan Yatavara, look, I think you were playing advantage there. We need to check whether it was over or not. Now, that creates a lot of pressure on the referee, doesn't it? Because he's just given a try. So he has to have a reason to rule it out. So how do you come out of that situation? You ask the TMO to step in and give you a little bit of assistance.
Yes, that's exactly what he did. So the question there is probably the correct decision was made at the end of the day, but whether the correct process was followed is what comes into question.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what I think both sides of the divide seem to be arguing. Obviously, the team that gets it in their favor will say eventually the correct decision was made, but the team that the decision did not go in favor will say was the correct process followed.
Yeah.
So that's what it eventually came down to. So yeah, it's a bit of a tough one, but at the end of the day, the correct decision was made, and it is what it is, isn't it? Because rugby, again, you have to sympathize with referees as well. It's a very fast-paced game. Got to maintain their concentration throughout the 70 minutes, and a lot is happening in between as well. So even it's the second time, as the previous replays we saw as well, it's the assistant referees who just had to come and give the referee a bit of a reminder. So yeah, it's one of those tough ones, but end of the day, it is what it is.
It really is. And Anil Jasingh, a very experienced TMO as well. He didn't usurp the function from Gihan Yatavara. He heard the call. And the interesting thing, Abdullah, in terms of process also, the referee can refer something leading up to a try. So he will argue, and if I was a lawyer for the referees, I would argue, saying this was something that was leading up to the try, and I wanted to refer it. So Anil Jasingh makes a very interesting comment. He said, you gave the advantage. If the advantage was over, it's a try. If the advantage was not over, it's not a try. And then Gihan Yatavara confers with Ravin Alexander. They decide advantage was not over, and they disallow the try. So that's how everything happened. There was a moment of control in that final, and that's the moment of control that we want to highlight on our SIAT in control segment. So we'll have plenty of more of these moments to talk about, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
2025 rugby season, you're on Ruck and Roll. We'll be looking at much more during the show.
SIAT Car Radials. The road is yours.
Lots of new things on season 2 of Rock and Roll, but we've kept some of the great things from last season, and one of them is my good friend Abdullah Yusuf, who's come back for our expert analysis. Abdullah, looking forward to the 2025 Schools League, but also looking back at the Dialogue Trophy knockout tournament that we had as well. Let's have a look at the groups a little later, but let's talk about that big game and, of course, the tournament as well. The final was a fitting end to what was a good tournament, wasn't it?
Yes, it was indeed a very good tournament, and also it was something new, I guess, for all the spectators as well, isn't it? Generally, there is a build-up towards the season with the leagues where probably the bigger teams have to play against the bottom sides, and they just have that ability to build themselves up. But here, things just changed around every game. It was a do-or-die match for all teams. So some teams coped with it well, some teams probably struggled. But eventually, as the tournament went on, I think the quality of the games got better and better. Sure. And it ended up with that brilliant final that we witnessed.
Yeah, it was a fantastic final, and we'll be speaking to Shahid Zumri also later. But the wonderful try that they scored at the end, you need to have a lot of nerves to execute in the 79th minute when you're tired. You've got to have the mental capacity to call that move first up and also to execute it. It just was a really good way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I think it comes from the fact that Isipatana have been exposed to those situations before as well, isn't it? Probably some of those players have been in those situations over the last 2 or 3 years where they regularly made finals. So when the game is in the balance, in those kind of situations, the ability to draw from those past experiences is invaluable. And that's probably what made the difference in that last play. Because if you look at the last 20 minutes, it's always seemed that Trinity had control of the game. They never seemed as if they were going to pull it off. You always had that sense that Isipatana were going to do something in that last moment. And that's exactly what happened.
And this is something I talked about in the pre-quarterfinal match that Trinity played against St. Anthony's, and they absolutely hammered them 62 points to 5. But what I do remember telling our friend Sudarshan Apiris and any Trinityan who would listen was, look guys, you smashed this team, but some of the tries were very individual, just one guy running 50-meter kind of tries, not created team tries, and that's something that a lot of these teams, not just Trinity, seem to have to do as the season goes on. Create things from first phase, second phase, third phase, that kind of actually making sure they have something to fall back on when the phase has gone about 6 or 7 phases.
Yeah, that's right. And this will probably happen when you face better teams as well, isn't it? We could see as the tournament progressed, games became much tougher. The better teams also had got match time under their belts, which was important because if you look at some of the teams in their first match, they looked very rusty. Royal was one team that looked pretty rusty. Even some of the Candy teams, they really struggled with the exception of Trinity. So as the tournament progressed, as they got more game time under their belts, they just seemed to be more comfortable, to get their systems right, get their understanding right. And that's where defenses started becoming a bit strong. So teams actually had to work a bit more in attack in order to create opportunities, as you mentioned. And when it came to that final, both teams, the defenses pretty much stood up. And also we need to keep in mind the conditions of the ground. It had rained a lot. It did not particularly rain during the game, but the ground was very heavy, isn't it? So it was not conducive to very fast open rugby. So it was going to take a lot of effort to break down defenses. And eventually the team that just hung in there managed to pull it off, which was Isipatana.
Yeah, it was a fantastic final, and it gave us a precursor as to what we might be seeing in the league season as well. Let's talk about the groups, Abdullah, because the fixtures will be coming up next week. In Group 1A, we have St. Peter's, a team under a little bit of a cloud, but they will be back, we are told. Whether they will be missing some senior players, we are yet to see. DS Serenayake in the Srem group, along with Wesley, Science, St. Anthony's, and Anand. Now, St. Anthony's we've already seen. Anand we've already seen as well. We've seen Wesley and Science go out in the pre-quarterfinals and semi-finals of the knockout trophy. And DS as well, strong showing against Royal in that quarterfinal. And of course, St. Peter's with unknown quantity quite yet. How do you see that group panning out?
Yes, it's going to be a pretty tough group, isn't it? Again, as you mentioned, a lot could depend on how well St. Peter's what kind of team they will be able to put out, which we'll have to wait and see. But DS and Science are teams that can cause problems for a lot of teams. But just watch out for Wesley College. I think they're a team that have got some very good individual players. I feel that they are yet a bit loose in the way they play. If they can just tighten up and bring a bit more structure into their play, they have got the players to create opportunities for them. But if they can just tighten things up, they will be definitely a team to look out for. So that group is pretty much open, and it's going to be really interesting to see who comes out of that group, considering the situation with St. Peter's as well.
Yeah. And looking at Anand as well, they're a big team. They've done really well in their segment of the knockout trophy. So let's wait and see how they manage their maiden season coming back into the A division after a long time. They were a fantastic team back when we were juniors, Abdullah, in the early 90s when those are big Anand teams were doing really well. So it's good to see them back in the A division as well. Group 2A, we have Isipatana, St. Thomas's, Zahira, Dharmaraja, Kingswood and Mahanama. Seems on paper like a bit of an easier group than the first one, and you have to fancy that Isipatana will go through in number 1 position, and there will be a battle between St. Thomas's and Zahira probably for 2 and 3.
Yeah, that's right. But also I think it's we shouldn't discount the two Kandy schools as well. I feel the Kandy schools, especially Dharmaraja and Kingswood, Kingswood, if they do have matches in Kandy, they could be a different outfit, isn't it? Because I felt coming down to Colombo, they probably just struggled with the humidity in those games. So if some of those fixtures are in Kandy, they definitely have got the ability to create some upsets. But just going by the form book, it's hard to look past Isipatana and St. Thomas's from that group.
Yes, let's see how things work, because Trinity and St. Thomas's met in the quarterfinal. It was probably the tightest of the quarterfinals, and they took Trinity right down to the wire. Trinity's defense again holding out really well, but St. Thomas's have shown a little bit more promise than they have in the previous couple of seasons. So let's wait and see how the group pans out, because Zahira also pretty strong showing in their semi-final against Trinity. I thought, Abdullah, there were a few moments that they looked like they might be the finished article.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially in that first half, if I'm not mistaken, it was 12-all going into the second half. But probably Trinity's experience shown in that second half as well. But they have definitely got some quality players, and there were phases of play in that quarterfinal where they rather from the semi-final, where they showed that they could cause some teams some upsets. So if they do manage to get a few games in Maradana at home, I think they could be a side that can cause some problems. But yes, I think they definitely have got the players who can create some issues for the teams in that group.
And Dharmaraja, Mahanama and Kingswood. Kingswood is a strong showing against Royal in their pre-quarter final. A lot of Royalists had their hearts in their mouths towards the end of that game. And let's see whether Kingswood under Ananda Kasturirachi can bring their former glory back in this season. We'll wait and see. Those are the Group 2A seedings. And then, of course, Group 3A, we have Royal and Trinity at the top of their group. So another Bradby matchup. Vidyartha College, St. Joseph's, who have fallen off a little bit in the last couple of years, Abdullah, Sri Sumangala and Thurston, who are doing pretty well as well. So that also, when you look at Group 1A and 2A and 3A, seem like they might be slightly easier groups. But how do you see this one going? The big battle, of course, the Royal Trinity.
Yeah, that's right. Vidyartha also, I think, pre-season there was a lot of talk about how good they can be. But unfortunately, I think they came unstuck in their first match itself. But again, they're a team in Kandy, can cause, especially the teams from Colombo, a bit of problems. But St. Joseph's, yes, they also seem to have fallen off a bit. Sumangala probably will cause moments of panicking to opponents, but probably whether they have the consistency to do that over 70 minutes is questionable. Thurston, yet a bit of an unknown quantity. So probably the dark horse in that group will probably be Vidyartha, but again, probably Royal and Trinity are the teams favoured to come out of that group as well.
So you've got the top two of these teams going through into the Cup Championship, you've got the middle two going into the Player Championship, and of course the bottom two who will go in for the Shield. So that's what we're looking at. Who will be the teams that go through into each of those competitions? So like Abdullah was saying, there's a lot of teams in here, but the fact remains that there's something for all of them to play for, isn't it? It's not just that you play your league and then you're forgotten about for the rest of the tournament. You always have a trophy to play for wherever you finish in these groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this structure is good, especially considering the fact that they have so many teams in the top tier. It's important that all of them do get a chance to play a lot of matches. So I think each team will at least get a minimum of 10 games, which I think is great, plus a few games which they would have had in the knockouts as well. So yes, overall I think it's the structure. There are a few pros and cons in terms of the discussions that have been happening, but I think on the whole, all teams will get considerable amount of game time, which you want at this level, which I think is great.
Bringing more players into the mix, that's what the Schools Rugby Association has tried to do with this format, bringing more teams into the A division. And that's something that has some supporters, has some naysayers as well, Abdullah. And in terms of the cons of this particular thing, it's about teams playing mismatched games, about smaller teams coming up against bigger teams and maybe getting injured. And then, of course, having everyone available for the whole A division to see, which means that player poaching is also something that people have talked about. So lots of issues that may crop up as a result of this format, but also the fact that teams are getting to play against better players, get more experience.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes the other side of the argument is unless you play against better teams, you won't get better. Exactly. So that's the other argument of it. But just as long as the mismatches are not too frequent, I think the groups are balanced. There are the top ranked teams, then you have the middle tier and you have the bottom team. So it's an opportunity for all those teams to play against better schools. I think the juniors just watching their seniors play against top schools will also just inspire them as they go along. I think that is also very important. And overall, I think the structure, the way it is, the fact that there are the other tiers to give the teams an opportunity to contest for something in the next stage, I think overall will balance the negatives that this kind of tournament structure has.
Yeah, so there's nothing that you can do without having some kind of criticism for it. The Schools Rugby Association has tried two things this year. They've tried to have the knockout tournament early on in the season so that everyone participates. We'll have to wait and see whether that is a success or not. And for the moment, it seems like it was. And of course, the league format, we'll have to wait and see how that goes as well. And we'll be following every one of those moves on Ruck and Roll in 2025. Abdullah, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, Shanaka.
Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
There's a brand spanking new feature for you on this edition of Ruck and Roll 2025, and that allows you to win a whopping, Abdullah, a whopping 100,000 rupees at the end of this tournament, and that's through our prediction. Prediction, something that everybody's crazy for, isn't it? Before the game, you get all your WhatsApp groups, everyone saying, what's the score going to be, who's going to win, all of that kind of thing. It's a whole week-long conversation as to who's going to win the game. I like to wait for the match and find out at the end of 70 minutes, but a lot of people don't.
Yes, that's right. But it also what just creates that excitement, isn't it? The discussion, the banter that comes along with it. I think it's just absolutely brilliant. And also it forces people to virtually put their necks on the line, isn't it? Rather than benefiting from the benefit of hindsight. Yeah. They have to come out and say exactly what it is. So this is, I think, a great opportunity for the viewers to be a part of this game.
And what we've done is we've created a site for you that you will be able to bet on not bet, you'll be able to predict every single one of those games and tell us who you think is going to win those matches. And that's how you predict and win on this edition of Ruck and Roll 2025. What you have to do is visit the site podhubmatchup.com and find all the matches there, predict what you think is going to be the winning team, and then you will go into a draw, and the best person with the best predictions at the end of the season will win a 100,000 rupee prize. Abdullah and I, of course, unfortunately not eligible for the draw, but you guys are, so make sure you knock yourselves out, get predicting.
Hearts racing fast, we feel alive. For miles and miles, let your spirit fly. There's no turning back, the road is yours.
German-engineered tires for Sri Lankan roads. Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
special guest in the studio on Rock and Roll this evening, and we have our Sing Her Seats guest spotlight with none other than Shahid Zumri, a man we're speaking to for the first time on Rock and Roll. Would you believe it? Good evening, Shahid.
Good evening, Shanaga.
Good
Thank
to
you
have
for
you.
having me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you on the show. Let's talk about very quickly about your old school, Isipatana. Managed to bag a trophy for the first time in this first tournament of the season as well. I saw you on the field, I saw you on the sidelines as well, making sure that you were giving your input to the team. Tell me, what was that final like in the last few minutes?
I think it's almost really obvious because Isipatan has been playing almost every good rugby in the last few minutes. So even last year when I was playing, played almost every matches was turned around last minute, and I think that's what just got our boys fighting for it and getting through it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an experience about
Yes.
having the confidence to come through in the last minute. I was watching the drone shots of that last try, Shahid, and you could see Yuvindu calling that pass about 2 phases before it actually happened. Is that something you had practiced over the week?
Yes. So that week, the 20 final week, so I was with the boys. We had a small camp, and then I think that was practice almost 2-3 days. It was going on practicing. It was a fully planned move from the line out until the try with both Eji coach and Chanaga sir. So I think it was a well planned move that ended up with a good result. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and he did a lot of good work to finish that as well, because the Trinity defense, even at that last minute, was really good. They were fantastic, were they? Even to break them down was really hard.
Yes, I think if you go through the whole knockouts tournament, I think Trinity came that far because of their defense. I think they were the best side when it comes to defense compared to other teams. And yes, Trinity, of course, even in that game, they were really good at their defense. They didn't let us cross that line very easily. And yeah, I think that very moment you just needed something bit more magical thing to happen to go through that line. And I think Yuvindu and the rest of the team really did that.
Yeah, they did that. It was a magical game, and it was a fantastic way to start the season. But let's talk about your season now, Shahid. After winning this same trophy last year, you have now moved on. You've gone and played with the champion club, Candy Sports Club. Now you've had a chance to play against the New Zealand under-85s as well. It must be a pretty steep learning curve from Isipatana to the other facets of rugby.
Yes, of course. Now lately my life has been just all over the oval ball. It has been going around and around and around. So yeah, for me, of course, I'm enjoying each and every bit of it. A really good opportunity for me. Talking about last year, yes, had a lot of work to do. Even in the preseason, couldn't just get the players into right positions. But we had a really good start from the season. We had quite good games to come until the finals, and I think boys has to go all the credit to the coaching staff and the boys, just pulled off it.
And how much did all that stuff that you have learned from guys like Nigel Ratwata, Tarinder Ratwata, Srinath Surya Bandara, how much of that were you able to give back to the younger players?
Yes, a lot, because being especially with Fazil sir also in our side, Niger, that's the main reason I went to Kandy. You have all the star players in Sri Lanka, or almost everyone are the legends. So you have a lot to learn, not only on the field, also off the field. I've learned a lot with them. And then went back to school, I think a lot. My knowledge was really good about rugby when I was moving around with them. So I had a lot to share with the boys about the commitment, the discipline, and mainly the focus they had in Kandy. It's almost a similar culture when it comes to club rugby with our school. So I think that helped a lot.
And how has Sri Lanka practice been, Shahid? I know you're just after Sri Lanka practice, so thank you for coming. But how is it going, and how's the new coach, and how are things progressing?
Yeah, all good. Going really hard, because compared to the last few games, after the Malaysia game, the All Blacks game, so had to go through the game a bit, and then the coaching staff, they really got together, and they thought that we are not a bit fit enough compared to them. So training sessions has been really tough, and when it gets tough, you enjoy a lot. So I think we can get forward in a really good.
The forwards
match,
must be having a tough time these days.
Yeah, a big time.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to the qualifications against UAE, Hong Kong, and of course South Korea as well. Are you watching their games? Are you looking at a little bit about the previous games that we played against them?
Yes, So I think few of our players, we just get together and, you know, even at home, we just go through their games. And position-wise, I personally look at the centers and fullbacks and, you know, try to learn something from that. What are their strengths and what are their weakness? So I think the level we are there, I think we can really give a good fight and come up on top.
Great, fantastic. That's good to see, and we'll be cheering you all the way. Shahid Zumri joining us on the Singer Seats guest spotlight for this evening's edition of Rock and Roll. Shahid, thanks so much for joining us, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Singer Furniture for stylish lifestyles.
Brand new season of the show, and we have some brand new guests as well with us. We have Majid, who is an expert physio, discussing things that we are going to be discussing in the recovery room segment of Rock and Roll. We're going to be discussing injuries, how to prevent them, and how to recover from them as well. Majid serves as the physio for the Sri Lanka team on a consultant basis, Havelocks, Isipatana, and many of the other schools, and treating quite a few of the players who are in this A division segment as well. Majid, welcome to Rock and Roll.
It's nice to be here to pass on my whatever knowledge I have. Yeah.
Well, we're all learning, right? So that's what we want to try and do together,
Definitely.
Majid. So tell me about the pre-season. It's a long segment of preparation before we get into the season proper, where the games start happening.
Yeah.
So how do you work on things like injuries in that lead up to the season start?
That's a very good point because most of the injuries happen in season, but pre-season is where you prevent most of those injuries from happening. We focus mainly on pre-season training, and we want to prioritize injury prevention as making your body more durable to resist any forces that come to you, as well as improving your balance, coordination, things like that, so that you don't put your body into those positions where it's too aggressive on your body when you're going into the season.
So recently we saw the New Zealand under-85 team here, Majid, and they were complaining a lot about the heat and about the quality of the grounds and things. They weren't complaining, but they were saying, okay, it's different here. And they immediately, after they had their first game, the first thing they did was they shortened their warm-ups and said, we don't need this much in this particular weather conditions. So in terms of what we get from abroad, what we see on the internet, what some of the coaches might be learning in their foreign trainings, how do you adapt that stuff to suit Sri Lankan conditions?
That's also a very good point because we always look at the pinnacle of sport and how they do it, and we try to use their playbook most of the time. But something what we don't realize is that we need to adapt to our conditions, in the sense that we need to focus on preparation first to prepare on game day what's going to happen. Is it going to rain? Is it going to be too warm? Depending on that, we might pump our hydration up before the game, get our electrolytes in. If it's going to be a wet day, then we focus a lot on prepping our muscles and joints so that we can tolerate those forces while on the field. So those are very good points that you make, so that we need to adjust those things depending on the conditions that we are set into. So pre-planning and preparation is where we need to focus most of our attention to if you're looking at an injury perspective side.
So let's talk about the physio's role in that, Majid, because obviously as the physio, you can't go around to maybe 40, 45 players and say, okay, did you drink your water today? How much water have you drunk? That's just not a practical thing to do. And also ensuring that people are getting their rehabilitation done, their prehab done. That's another thing we can talk about later on in the series. But what is your role as the physio in this whole setup?
So sometimes it depends from team to team. In certain contexts, then I would be the one who would make sure everyone's ready for the game in terms of injuries. And hydration happens through a set protocol with most teams which I work with. We have a set protocol, okay, our water levels have to be this much. And the easy way for most of the viewers who are out there also to test it is your urine has to be colorless or transparent. That shows that you're well hydrated. And then if it is a pale yellow or dark yellow, that means you need to get a lot more water in. And another bad thing we do is we try to pump too much water sometimes into our bodies, which also is not that great. So it has to happen before the day before our games as well as the day of the game, preparing 4 hours before the game starts. Yeah.
So, as a consultant, you're not the full-time physio for most of these teams, but what do you notice in terms of the relationship between the coach, the strength and conditioning coach, the physio, the assistant coaches? How does this all work together? Because obviously the physio is not a magician, right?
Exactly. That's a very good point. Most people think that I'm a magician because I work with so many people, but that's a very important point to take, is that I don't have magic hands. I don't do anything that is magical. What I do is try to get the best out of the player who is injured into their best condition while being injured. And that is not only me. I'm just setting the pathway for them. Whereas the coaches, the strength and conditioning coach, the forwards coach, backs coach, head coaches, all those have to contribute into creating that or empowering the player to take those decisions while on the field. So that if there is contact sessions, we might remove them out of contact. If they're having like shoulder injury, if they have like a groin, hamstring injury, we'll reduce their load on their running. So we have to communicate with the coaches quite deeply and prepare them before the week so that they know what's coming ahead.
So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and also we have, in terms of that relationship, how is the working professionalism between those aspects? Majid, do you find that coaches are a little resistant to it sometimes when you come and say, okay, I don't want this guy to run as much, or I don't want you to do too much contact because his team has been doing too much already. I've monitored their load and this is, I feel this is too much. What is the response you get?
It's a varying response. Some coaches are really good at being attentive to what I say and taking it as information. They might not always use my information, but rather they don't do exactly what I say, but they'll use my information in a way that helps the team as well as the player, and not putting any detriment to the player's injury as it is. But then there are some coaches who are very, I won't say stubborn, but very firmly focusing on the plan of that day, where they can have mismanagement of those players if they are looking in a very focused view of the day's practice plan, right? So it's a matter of adapting, and it's a matter of being open to take those information and apply it into the training program so that those athletes are not put into vulnerable positions so that they don't get injured or they don't increase their injury per se.
And is it correct to say player safety is your priority?
Yes, my priority, as long as the player is not going to have a lifelong injury, as well as it's not going to cause a problem in their next few weeks by just doing a small mistake, that's my main priority. So in season, we don't work too much on fixing injuries per se, but we will look at managing injuries. Yeah.
So management of injuries is another fascinating topic which we're going to be touching on a lot as the season 2 of Rock and Roll goes on. A big thank you to Majid for joining us today, and he'll be with us for the rest of the season as well. Thanks very much, man.
Happy to be here.
Hearts racing fast, we feel alive. For miles and miles, let your spirit fly. There's no turning back, the road is yours.
German-engineered tires for Sri Lankan roads. Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
And that's a wrap for episode 1 of season 2 of Rock and Roll. We've had a fantastic show, and without even any rugby being on. So imagine what it's going to be like when the rugby does start up next week. Thanks very much to Seat, of course, for being on the show with us once again this year. A big thank you to Singha Furniture for providing us our wonderfully comfortable seats for our guest segments as well. And don't forget, you can also read Rock and Roll on the morning paper in the week. So make sure you catch Abdullah's column when it comes out in the morning newspaper. Thanks very much for joining us. Get predicting and join us next week for more rugby action on Rock and Roll. My name is Shanaka. See you next week.